Greeting everybody, it's RPG Grandma. We're going to try to get a lot done. Star Frontiers, where we left off, creating creatures. So they give an example of right here on designing your own creature with the Hydra in mind, because they talked about switching up that Hydra, right? So they give you different types of attacks that you could roll for or simply choose, like acid spray, dart, sonic beam, and gas cloud. What they do, how, the kind of damage, what distances these things could shoot at. Choose, and they tell you to choose what a gas attack does. That it creates a situation where people can't see, and they must move out of the gas to see what they're doing and to shoot. And then it goes into special abilities like smashes through walls, shakes grounds, can teleport, spins a web, has doze gas, grows stronger, grows new attack. And it explains what that is. So if the creature's immune, it gets hit by the thing that it's immune to, then it causes it to get these special abilities. Or maybe it takes extra damage. If it's not immune to something, it's like the opposite. It loses one attack. It changes one ability. Suddenly it mutates, right on the spot. It talks about damage to the monorail terminal, and how the monster might it's bitten through like the power cables, what that does. Then it talks about movement. Yeah, it gives you movement choices. Can it move faster, slower? Or how are you going to make this creature different than the one in the book? It talks about defensive properties. For instance, insulation, immune to needles. Protective shell, immune to the gyrojets. Reflective hide, immune to lasers. Regenerates, reduces damage from each attack by 5 points because it's constantly eating. And what about goals? What if its goal isn't to get that keeper? Gives some suggestions and gives a paragraph like eat enough to lay eggs. It's going to eat a lot of people. Find someone other than that it was looking for before. Build a nest. Destroy the town. It gives points for the building's values, and if it gets up to 40 points, creature wins. Okay. Destroy all the skimmers it comes across. And this is a good template, but there's even a better one in the advanced rules. But this gives you a good idea about how you could start look at a pre-existing creature and then come up with lists of things on your own to then start modifying those creatures and making them unique. All right, now then it goes on to creating your own adventures. They wanted the kids to learn how to create their own adventures. And I really wish modern games really included stuff like this. I mean, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but I think it's really important. So they talk about things that you need to keep in mind. You need a purpose. You need some kind of generic storyline, idea. You need to decide the teams. I think we call those now, and cool in term is factions. Basically, players. Is it going to be PCs versus NPCs? Are there going to be competing groups? Is it going to be PCs versus PCs, player versus player, that kind of thing? What are the win conditions? How do you win? What's the setup going to look like? And they even talk about, for instance, if you're going to do Crash on a Desert Planet. So they start talking about resources, types of weapons, things the players are going to need. These are things you have to include in the game. They talk about creating a map or using pre-existing maps and what scale you need if you're going to use those little chits. They talk about creating goals. For instance, they crash on the planet. They need to get to the radio, the beacon that got ripped off the ship when it crashed, because they only have so much water. And again, resource management, boom, right here, but it's presented in a very natural way, not the mechanical way that the adults talk. Just like, hey, you're on a desert planet, you only have so much water. You're going to use every turn. The players must subtract 1 from their water supply. They have 25 turns worth of water. When it reaches 0, they will pass out. So puts pressure on them. Before this happens, they got to get that beacon. All right? And then the player characters must tell the reader which direction they are scanning at the end of their turn. The reader then rolls a 1d10 without letting the players see the result. If the players were looking in the right direction and the number rolled on the die was greater than the number of spaces between the characters and the beacon, the reader tells the player their scan has detected the beacon in the general direction. So, you give them a scanner, all that stuff they pulled out of the ship. And then it goes into talking about movement. Every turn is a half an hour, for example. They talk about at the end of every turn, because they're traveling across this distance, they're going to roll, the characters roll a D100. And then we look on a chart that's been supplied here for events. We got monsters, we got, creature, sunstroke, poison water, oasis, characters wander into a circle, so they roll the number and the reader looks and then says, hey, this thing starts, whatever it is. It gives some creatures down here that belong in that environment that can attack them. And so right here, it gives you a bunch of things in a very natural way. Very, very intuitive, with an example of how to develop a story that then you can use as your template. And there's a module with adventures and goals. And then it talks about, rewards. The reason for giving rewards. Characters need rewards so they can pay for healing, so they can, later on go improve their characters. They need equipment. They need all this stuff, so you need to give them rewards. And then it gives a bunch of other suggested ideas, like strange alien disease, alien artifacts, special meeting of delegates, abandoned alien city ship. And that is basically the end of these basic rules. They've given you everything you need to, like, if this was the only thing you had, you could figure out how to play this basic game, period. You don't necessarily need anything more. They also included definitions of terminology in here. And this was a teaching. They were trying to teach the metric system when this came out. So they included the metric system. And gave, if you're measuring length in English and in the metric system. And they gave the English unit and the metric equivalent. And they gave the metric unit and the English equivalent and approximations. So you could wrap your head around, especially if you didn't know the metrics, the language being used and what it means. And that, my friends, is the end of the basics rules. This is a wonderful template for anybody who wants to try to teach a game to somebody and expects them to pick up a box and play. and I seriously wish more games had